I'll see you soon.
Tonight's upload is brought to you by our patrons from the Patreon page. That's Cecilia Spears, Hawaii, Carl Leakins, Catherine McClear, Sean Campbell, Iron Alexa, Allison Sibe, Ryan Woodward, TikTok12, Bree, and Bonanza Jellybean. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel through Patreon. And if anybody listening right now enjoys the content of the 80 Slasher Librarian YouTube channel and would like to help keep it going and growing for a long time to come, then click the link in the description below and sign up on Patreon for as low as $2 to $5 per month. You get some great rewards depending on the tier you select, such as the $2 tier gets you the early access content, the $5 tier gets you the early access plus a free ebook emailed to you every 3 months, and every 12 months you get a free gift from the merch store. There's also a $15 tier that gets you a free gift from the merch store every 6 months, a free ebook every 3 months, and you can appear on the podcast and voice a character in an audiobook narration once per month. So there's many choices to choose from. Just click the Patreon link in the description below and check it out. There's even a mega tier that comes with a lot more stuff. And enjoy tonight's upload of Final Destination Dead Reckoning. Final Destination Dead Reckoning. Chapter 9. Back at Charlie's house, Jess sat on the sofa, her head propped up on her hands. Charlie sat next to her at a slight distance. They watched through the dining room window as paramedics and police swarmed around in the front yard, speaking urgently into walkie-talkies and fussing around with yellow police tape. The silence stretched between them like an invisible spiderweb, the air filled with unspoken thoughts. Jess fancied that she could see them buzzing around Charlie's head like angry mosquitoes. She rubbed her eyes, sunken too deeply into her own misery to bother with platitudes. She wondered how Charlie was coping. There was no words to describe how she was feeling. When she was little, Jess remembered that her dad had always told her that when bad stuff happened, she should visualize a big empty box in her mind, then gather everything about the bad events up and put it into that box. Then simply close the lid on it. He said it would get everything together in the same place. That way you could put the box away in a corner of your head and free up the rest of your mind to carry on your day. That was bullshit, Jess decided. No one with as many problems as her father could give her advice on how to deal with stuff. Besides which, there was no way in hell she could visualize a box that goddamn big. Charlie was the first one to speak. "I didn't mean to do it." "Nobody said you did," said Jess. She was staring blankly at the carpet. "It was an accident, just an accident." Charlie just shook his head. He looked dazed. "Do you think—" he began. "What?" "Nothing. It's just—" Charlie appeared to be on the verge of tears. "She saved me from the club, I mean." "I know." Jess reached out and patted Charlie awkwardly on the knee. "Wasn't for her needing a cigarette, I'd be dead." "You don't know that," Jess soothed. "Yes, I do. She saved my life. Now she's dead." Charlie thought for a moment. "Like it's payback or something." He thought for a moment. "Is God punishing me?" "That's ridiculous. There is no God. Don't say that." "I can't help it," said Charlie, looking anguished. "I keep thinking about what happened. I could have saved her." You don't know that. She... Look, you didn't know she was still down there," said Jess. At the back of her mind, an evil little voice whispered, "Charlie's single now." She mentally threw a rock at that voice, shocked at the thought. That was the last thing she needed to be thinking about right now. But if Charlie really was single... Shut up, she told the voice. She'd had it with dating. Men, bad. Ice cream, good, she reminded herself. She didn't need the stress in her life. She tried to think of other things that didn't involve Charlie. She had a really, really hard time of it. After a minute had grated past, Jess decided that she'd had enough. Her thoughts were going in circles, and she was getting nowhere. She got abruptly to her feet, then strode over to the window and stared out at the scene. "I can't just sit here. I need to go and do something. I don't know what. Sitting here is making me crazy." She turned and studied a poster on the wall, a chart of spider species, Above it was a box of preserved butterflies mounted on pins. She pulled a face. Creepy. "Can't we go out and help?" "Police chief said to stay here." Charlie tapped his fingers on the leather side of the sofa. His face paled with worry. "Do you think they'll press charges?" Jess looked at him. "What do you think?" I don't know." Charlie wrung his hands together. "I told you it was an accident. It wasn't your fault." She put a hand on Charlie's shoulder. He didn't seem to notice. She decided to leave her hand there just for a moment. A thought struck her. She had to ask him something. She turned towards him, her eyes lowered. "Charlie, I don't know if now is the time, but there was something I wanted to—" She stopped as the door handle turned, but instead of the sheriff she was expecting, it was someone very familiar. "Jamie!" Jess jumped up and threw her arms around him. "I came as soon as I heard. What the hell happened?" Jess turned her face inwards, pressing her cheek against Jamie's chest. "It was horrible, just horrible," she said. Pulling away, she looked up at Jamie. He was freshly shaven, but looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was wearing his black gas attendant's uniform, complete with shiny gold name tag. "I tried to go to work," he said, by way of explanation. He shook his head ruefully, starting to unzip his top. "That lasted a long time. I just couldn't—" "Jamie, man, good to see you." Charlie stood up and solemnly clapped Jamie on the back. Jamie blinked at the sight of Charlie. Yeah, good to see you too." Jamie's voice sounded a little odd, but Jess didn't notice. She had never seen him in his work clothes before. He looked kinda cute, actually, which was weird, because she saw him go topless on stage every night, and had never really paid much attention to the way he looked before. It must be the shock, she thought to herself. Shock does funny things to a person. "How did you hear?" she asked, sitting back down on the sofa. "The sheriff called me, said that you'd been involved in an accident." Jamie paused, gazing at Jess. There was a strange look on his face. "I thought he meant that—" "Involved? No, she wasn't involved." Charlie sat down beside Jess and put a protective arm around her shoulders. He nodded to Jamie. "Come on in. Sit down, man." "No thanks, I'll stand." An uncomfortable second ticked by. Jamie stared at Charlie's arm for a moment, then looked at Jess, a question in his eyes. She avoided his gaze expertly. "Jess had nothing to do with it," Charlie said. "It was me who did it. I killed Amber." "Charlie, you got to stop saying that!" "But it's true. One minute she was alive, talking to me, just like we're talking now. Next minute she was dead. All because of me." "Come on now, it wasn't your fault. Would you stop saying that? Of course it was my fault. I didn't mean to do it, but it happened. And now she's dead." Charlie's fist clenched on his lap, his eyes fixed to the scene outside the window. For once in his life, his cheeky demeanor was gone. "Do you know what the last thing she said to me was?" "Charlie, you don't have to—" "We had an argument. When she was leaving, she told me that I was mean and that I didn't care if she lived or died. She said that to me." "Well, I'm sure she didn't mean it." "Of course she meant it. I was mean to her. She came over to see me and I blew her off just because I want—" Charlie glanced at Jess and shook his head. "She was wearing pink nail varnish. She only wears that on, really special occasions." Charlie's voice choked up. He bowed his head, staring at the floor. "Come on now, it wasn't your fault. It was just a dumb accident." "I know it was. I know that." Charlie swallowed, his voice tight. "But I made it happen. So it was still me who killed her." "Come on now. If you think like that, you're gonna go crazy." Jess thought for a moment. "Hell, if you want to blame anyone, blame me." "You? Why should I blame you?" "Because I was in the bath." Charlie stared at her. "How does that make it your fault?" "Well, if I got out of the bath just 15 minutes earlier, I would have been downstairs with you guys. I could have done something. Talked to Amber. Kept her here a couple more minutes. Kept her away from that driveway." "That's stupid." "No, it's not. Or I could have helped you with the car. Stopped it from rolling. If I'd been there with you, Amber might still be alive now." But you weren't there, sniffed Charlie. You didn't know. But neither did you. Jess glanced outside the window again. It was just a dumb accident. She gestured helplessly. A million things could have saved her. She could have stopped to tie her shoelaces before crossing the drive, but she didn't. She could have gone straight home instead of stopping to pick that rose, but she didn't. Hell, a duck could have hit an airplane in the sky and fallen down on her head, but it didn't. That's what makes it so dumb. But Charlie stopped, a tiny glimmer of hope in his eyes. She didn't know what was going to happen, so she didn't do any of those things. That's my point. Jess sat forwards in her seat, bitterness sounding for the first time in her voice. Shit happens. We can't control everything that happens to us. We can control some of it, but not all. She gave a hollow laugh. That bit we can't control? It's called fate. It sucks. Get used to it. Charlie was quiet for a moment. I did everything I could, he said. I know you did, said Jess. She squeezed Charlie's hand. You did your best. It's all any of us can really do. Jess gazed up at Charlie. He didn't let go of her hand, and she felt her mouth go dry. His eyes were even more blue than usual at close quarters. She wondered hazily whether he wore contacts to make them so blue. She peered closer, trying to see if there was a telltale ring of a contact lens around the edge of his iris. "Excuse me, guys. Not to break up the party or anything, but, shouldn't we be out there, I don't know, filling in reports or something?" Charlie and Jess looked up at Jamie. He was hovering awkwardly in the doorway. She had forgotten that he was there. Some part of her recognized that she should feel bad about this. "Well, isn't that what you do when someone dies?" Jamie prompted, scuffing a boot on the floor. He stared down at the floorboards, a fixed expression on his face. "Are you all right?" said Jess after a moment. "I'm fine. Of course, I'm fine." Jamie sounded irritated. "I just had a stressful night, that's all, but I'm perfectly fine." He looked her in the eye. "How are you?" "I'm just dandy," said Jess, frowning at Jamie. What was up with him? He was acting weird. "You look tired," said Jamie, then stopped as though he had said too much. He shifted from foot to foot, his eyes flicking nervously between Jess and Charlie. "Yeah, I am a little sleep-deprived." "You both look tired," said Jamie carefully. "Me? No, I slept fine," said Charlie. He was still holding on to Jess's hand. "Oh, really? That's good to know. And where did you sleep last night?" "I slept here. I live here." Now Charlie was staring at Jamie. He frowned as though seeing him for the first time and sat up a little straighter. "Why do you ask?" "That's good," said Jamie, ignoring Charlie's question. "And where did Jess sleep?" "Who?" "Jess." Jamie pointed. "Oh, Jess!" Charlie paused for a moment, glancing up as though feeling something away in his head. "She slept, well, I don't know. In the police station, I guess." He met Jamie's eyes, a challenge on his face. "I see." Jamie turned to Jess. "Did you?" "Of course I did. What, don't you believe him?" "Should I?" "Yes, he's telling the truth." Jess started to feel uncomfortable, holding on to Charlie's hand. She squeezed it briefly, then let go. "What's up with you?" A muscle clenched briefly in Jamie's jaw. He turned away from her to look out of the window. "Nothing," he said tensely. "I'm just tired." He pointed outside, where a covered stretcher was being loaded into the back of a paramedic van. "And she's dead. Kind of destroys the mood, don't you think?" He glanced pointedly back at Charlie. That did it. Anger sparked in Charlie's eyes. He started to get up, but Jess put a hand on his knee and shook her head slightly. She got up from her seat and walked up behind Jamie. "Hey," she said softly. There was no reply. Jess reached out and touched Jamie's elbow, inquiringly, but he pulled away from her. "Excuse me," he muttered. "I've got to go." He pushed past her roughly and headed towards the door, zipping up his uniform as he walked. "Where are you going?" "Work. I'm late." "Have fun." A second later, the door banged shut. Charlie was the first one to speak. "What's his problem?" "Beats me." Jess stared after the retreating figure marching away down the path. "Let me go after him. I'll talk to him." He started towards the door, but Jess stood in his way.
"Let him go. He'll be fine. He doesn't need to be here."
"Why is he even here?" Charlie demanded. "He didn't know Amber. Well, why did the sheriff call him?" Jess shrugged, her eyes still on Jamie. He had stopped by the ambulance and was talking to one of the medics, gesturing back towards the house. Jess felt a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach.
"The sheriff saw me there. I guess he thought that we were together?"
"Why on earth would he think that?"
"We came in together last night to the police station. Some stuff happened. Jamie got caught up in it. I guess the sheriff just assumed that we were like a couple or something."
"And are you?"
"No, of course not. Jamie's—"
Jess stopped, searching through her mind for a way of describing Jamie.
"Well, he's Jamie. He's a nice guy."
She shrugged, unable to think of anything else to say. "So he's a nice guy. What else?"
"Nothing else. We're friends, that's all. Although we once had a—"
Jess stopped, conflicting expressions chasing themselves across her face. "Had a what?" prompted Charlie.
A drink together, once, a long time ago."
Jess cleared her throat nervously.
"Since then, well, he's been kind of hanging around me. I like him a lot, I really do, but just as a friend. I think he thinks there's more to it than that, but I haven't the heart to tell him otherwise."
She paused, shrugging helplessly.
"He's really a nice guy, but, well, he's got no car, no money, no real job prospects. But he's a kick-ass drummer. We really needed him in the band. Do you know how hard it is to get a decent drummer these days?"
"All that after one drink? Wow."
"Yeah," Jess shrugged. "It was a good drink, but that's all it was."
She heartily wished that Charlie would drop the subject. She was in no mood to deal with this right now. She yawned hugely, feeling a wave of tiredness sweep over her. Her little sleep in the bath hadn't done much to refresh her.
"Hey, do you mind if I lay down for a little while? I'm about ready to fall down."
"Sure." Charlie tossed a pile of newspapers off the sofa, then pulled a couple of cushions together, heaping them up at one end. He patted them with a hand. "Here you go."
"Thanks."
Jess lay down slightly self-consciously on the sofa, aware that Charlie was watching her every move. She glanced down at the newspapers on the floor in front of them. The top one had a cover story about a guy from Topanga Canyon who'd got trapped in an elevator for 3 days. That's news, she thought. Really? Shrugging to herself, she closed her eyes and tried to shut the horrors of the last 24 hours out of her mind. She tried to concentrate on nice things. She was warm. She wasn't in any immediate danger. And Charlie was there. She heard a chair creak at the end of the room as Charlie sat down. She opened her eyes for a moment and saw that he was gazing fixedly out of the window, his eyebrows drawn together in worry. Feeling her gaze on him, he glanced over and smiled briefly, before returning his gaze to the window. Jess smiled back, feeling herself blush. He was so cute. Then she rolled over and tried to relax. The cushions were soft under her head, and she was so sleepy. After a couple of minutes she frowned, eyes still closed. Despite the fact that she was exhausted, her mind was revving. Something had just clicked into place. What was it that the homeless guy had said to her the other night? Something about falling down? She wished she could remember. She knew it was important. Then she froze, the memory hitting her with crystal clarity. "You're all dead, but you still walk," he had said. She remembered because it had creeped her out totally when he'd said it. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up at the memory. What else had he said? Then she remembered. "You all fall down," she mouthed. "Girl next, then boy. You'll see." Jess's hand flew to her mouth. She'd had no idea at the time what he meant by girl, but he'd definitely been looking at Eric when he'd said boy. And now a girl was dead, which meant... Swallowing hard, Jess turned to Charlie.
"Where's your phone?"
she asked. Eric only stopped screaming when he ran out of breath to scream with. He lay on the floor, hands over his head, his eyes screwed tight shut. He didn't dare open his eyes for fear of what he might see. All was still again, which was just fine by him. This really wasn't his day. He was reasonably sure that he wasn't dead. He knew this because his head hurt and his mouth tasted like blood where he had bitten through his tongue. It was dark, but all his senses seemed to be working, which was always a good start. Groaning, Eric shifted on the floor and lifted his head groggily. At least the elevator had stopped moving now. He wasn't sure whether this was a bad or a good thing. He spat the blood out of his mouth and pushed himself up into a sitting position, moving carefully just in case. He groaned, feeling a wave of dizziness hit him. What the fuck had happened to the elevator? All he'd done was break a couple of wires. There was no way he could have known that this was going to happen. Moving infinitely slowly and carefully, Eric rubbed his head, feeling a big lump start to come up where his forehead had hit the floor on the way down. Oh, this so wasn't good. He had an idea. Groping in the darkness, he reached into his pocket, feeling for his cell phone. It wasn't there. Shit! Eric knew that he had to get out of here. He remembered with a shudder that brief, horrible moment in the darkness when the elevator had dropped, leaving his stomach a dozen feet above. He remembered thinking very clearly, "This is it!" He hadn't even been aware that he'd been screaming. Then an explosion of sparks had filled the elevator as the emergency brakes locked back into place, fizzing and glitching, bringing the elevator to a halt and knocking him to the floor. Now the elevator was still, but for how long? What if the brakes gave away again? Eric realized that he had to do something, and quickly. Someone would probably come along to rescue him sooner or later, but what if he didn't have that long left? He had to get out himself. He was too young and too pretty to end up as a pancake. All those years at the gym would be wasted for starters. Above him, something metallic creaked, and he froze, a stab of white-hot fear shooting through him. As he watched, the lights in the control panel flared up brightly, then exploded with a bang, leaving glowing after images dancing on the insides of his eyelids. Eric flinched, preparing himself for the worst. A loud clunking sound rang out, then something struck the top of the elevator and rolled off. There was a creaking noise from the cable above him. And then all was ominously quiet. Eric gave a small scream as the elevator suddenly dropped again, just a short distance of several feet, but it was enough to set his heart pounding. He clutched at the floor, swearing uncontrollably, his pulse thundering in his ears. The brakes must be on the way out, he decided, with a thrill of horror. They were working now, but how much longer would they hold? He knew he had to move fast. Moving as quickly as he dared, Eric got to his feet and stood up in the blackness, swaying like a drunken surfer. Was it just his imagination, or was the floor sloping a little under his feet? The thought sent a fresh chill of fear throughout him. He stepped forwards cautiously, all the while listening out for any warning sounds from the elevator. Nothing happened, so he moved to the front of the elevator and reached out his hand, groping urgently for the control panel. He shut his eyes in the darkness, trying to visualize where the door open button was located. Third one down, 2 to the right. Oh, was that it? Eric's fingers traced over the raised buttons cautiously. There was Braille on the buttons, and Eric found himself thinking guiltily about all those after-school classes he'd skipped. He wished desperately that he could wind back time and go to just one. But it was too late now. He had to sort this one out himself. There was one button that was bigger than the others. That had to be the one. There was only one way to find out. Eric held his breath and pressed the button.
"Can't you drive any faster?" Jess snapped, reaching down into the seat well of the car for her Thomas Guide map.
"Faster? You kidding? This is as fast as she'll go," lied Charlie. He gripped the steering wheel of his father's prized Jaguar tighter, praying that he wouldn't get pulled over. Palm trees and low-rise prefab buildings whizzed past his window at blinding speed.
"You're kidding, right? Please tell me you're kidding."
I wish I was. Look! Charlie pointed to a wood-inlaid dial aboard the Jaguar. See? This is her top speed. Jess squinted at the little dial.
That's the gas gauge.
Oh, really? Charlie gave a nervous little laugh. Silly me. Must have got confused. Which is the,
That's the speedometer, said Jess. And look, it goes all the way up to...
Yes, I know how fast she goes, said Charlie. It's just, she's an old car, you know. We have to take it easy on her.
Screw the car! Eric could be dead by now, snapped Jess. Don't you care?
Of course I care, said Charlie, trying to come to terms with this new side of Jess. When he'd talked to the girl before, she'd been so different, so calm and eager to please. She looked good, she smelled good, and she looked at him like he was some kind of rock star. He really dug that. She was just his kind of girl. Now she'd apparently turned into some kind of lunatic. She was still cute, but now she was scary cute. He wasn't too sure that he could handle that. He cleared his throat timidly. It's just, don't you think you're taking this a little too seriously? I mean, I'm sure it was a good dream, but maybe that's all it was. Just a dream. And that whole thing with the homeless guy? He stopped as he saw the look on Jess's face.
What?
Jess put down her map and stared at Charlie.
Do you think I'm making this up?
I did not say that. I don't know, I think the rushing over there might not be the right thing to do. Can't you try calling him again?
I did. He's still not answering.
Jess tossed her cell phone into the back seat. She folded her arms and sat back, jiggling one leg. The change of clothes she'd borrowed from Charlie fitted her quite well, but she wished heartily that the sweater wasn't pink. Charlie had assured her that it hadn't been Amber's, but she wasn't too sure that she believed him. So he's not answering his phone. Big deal. He's a guy. That could mean anything. He could be in the shower, out at a party, having a nap, lying dead in a ditch somewhere. Jess shook her head. Something's wrong. Something's happened to him. I can just feel it. What do you care all of a sudden? I thought you said you didn't like this guy.
I don't. I just feel responsible. If anything happens to him, it'll be my fault.
Jess, Charlie cleared his throat, tapping the wheel. I know that the last couple of days have been tough on all of us. And this morning, with Amber? I still can't believe...
I know, said Jess brusquely. She's dead and Eric's gonna be next.
You don't know that, said Charlie, thinking, I wish everybody would stop saying that. He tightened his grip on the wheel, trying to block the images of Amber from his mind. But running away like that, before the police chief even got back, just because you had, a dream? Don't you think it looks a little, incriminating?
It was an accident. Everybody said it was,
said Jess, her nose buried in the map.
You'll be fine. Just tell them you ran out of hair gel and had to make an urgent trip to the store.
Charlie unconsciously reached up and patted his hair down, unsure whether this was a compliment or not. You think they'll believe me?
No, but it's always worth a try.
Crap! Turn here! What, here? Charlie hauled on the wheel in a panic as the exit flew towards them, nearly blindsiding an expensive-looking BMW. The car blared its horn at him, and Charlie hit the brakes and swerved away to let it pass before turning. The driver yelled at them out of his window as they passed. Jess shouted something back at him that made Charlie blush. This wasn't at all the ride he'd expected to have with her. Not by a long shot.
Are you all right in the back there?
Jess called over her shoulder. I'm fine, said Jamie, clinging desperately onto the door handle as the car righted itself. He was starting to regret coming along with them, but he would be damned if he was going to let Jess ride off in a car with that bleached bozo. He should never have answered his cell phone when she'd called to tell him what they were doing, but after all, it was Jess. He rubbed his head where he had bumped it on the window. Hey, don't worry, I'm in a band. I didn't need those brain cells anyways, right? That's cool. Hang in there. We're nearly there. She turned back to Charlie.
Where the hell are we?
She said. Charlie shrugged. Jess opened up the map fully and ran her finger across it.
Damn it, we missed the Hoover Junction!
She stabbed a finger out of the window.
What road was that?" "I don't know. We're going too fast. I can't see the signs." "What are you, blind?" Jess stopped as something filtered through. Charlie Delgado. She smoothed down her hair and attempted a smile. "Sorry, perhaps we could afford to slow down a bit. Just a little bit, a little teensy bit," she added as Charlie gratefully let off the gas pedal. "So," Charlie said, still trying to get his head around what Jess had told him. "What you told me. I'm still trying to understand. You think that what, because this hobo guy said something about a girl dying, you think he meant Amber?" "And Eric," Jess nodded vigorously. "I know it sounds crazy, like psycho-crazy, but I just have this terrible feeling." She closed her eyes and struck her chest with her fist. "Right in here. That he knew what he was talking about. 2 people who survived from the club are dead. That's more than a coincidence." "And you don't think that he was like drunk or high?" "Probably both. It doesn't matter. I believe him. I was right about the club thing. This, I don't know. It just feels the same." She looked at Charlie meaningfully, holding his gaze just a second too long. "You've got to trust your feelings, you know?" "Right. Fine. If that's what you believe." Charlie spun the wheel and pulled over into the outside lane, slowing down as a traffic light approached. In front of him was a ridiculous-looking stretch Humvee with a bumper sticker that read, "Elevate your expectations." The picture on the sticker showed a Humvee driving out of an elevator. He pointed it out to Jess and got a small smile out of her. It was a start, he thought. "So what about the bouncer?" "What about him?" "Did the guy mention him at all?" Jess thought for a minute. "I don't know. I don't remember." "Well, there you go. If this guy was so great, he would have mentioned the bouncer, too." "Maybe he did. I was just so tired." Jess scratched her head irritably. "Perhaps I should go find him again." "What, the homeless guy?" "Uh-huh." Charlie gave a hollow laugh. "Good luck with that one. There are only 50,000 homeless folks living around here? It should be easy to find him, sure." "Don't be cheeky. If I'm meant to find him, then I will." Charlie shrugged. "It's your call. Do you even remember what this guy looked like?" Jess thought for a moment. "He had an old cowboy jacket on, with tassels on it, and he smelled very bad. That's about all I remember." "That narrows it down a bit." "Well, it's a start." "No, don't stop!" Jess knocked Charlie's hand away from the stick shift. "But the light's about to change." "So? This is L.A. Green means go. Yellow means go faster." "Whatever you say." Charlie slammed his foot down on the gas pedal, speeding past the changing light and rocketing across the intersection, accompanied by the traditional blast of horns from the waiting traffic. A pedestrian with one foot on the crosswalk jumped out of the way, hurling abuse. "Whew, that was fun," said Jess. The car bounced over a pothole, scraping its front end on the ground and making the suspension creak alarmingly. Charlie muttered an oath under his breath. "Now this guy," continued Jess, "he was downtown, probably around the middle of South Central." She thought for a moment. "Could you take me there later?" "Sure, as long as I don't have to stop or get out of the car at any point," said Charlie, putting a protective hand on the dashboard of the Jag. "If anything happens to this car, my dad'll kill me. He only lent it to me for the weekend." Jess looked at him blankly. "Does it matter? This is someone's life at stake here." "Or not." "Look, if you don't believe me, then that's fine." "I didn't say I didn't believe you. It's just, I don't know. I just think that we're going on a wild goose chase. Some terrible shit's happened, but I don't think that chasing after some random madman is going to help matters. Sorry." "It'll help me," said Jess quietly. "But will it? What if he's just been drinking windshield cleaner and tells you that you're going to die next? What then? Are you going to spend the next 10 years of your life locked up in a padded cell somewhere?" "You don't understand." Jess put down her map and turned to face Charlie. "I need to know this. All these people died, and it was my fault. I should have warned them, and I didn't." She paused and gazed out of the window, choosing her words carefully. "This has just blown everything else out of the water. It's changed everything. Who I am, where I'm going, everything." She broke off and waved a hand at the SUV in front of her. Come on, go! The light doesn't get any greener than that. What is it with these people today? She stamped her foot in frustration. Don't worry about it. You're probably still in shock. Just try to stay calm. We'll get through this, I promise you. Everything will be fine. Charlie put a hand on her shoulder and gently rubbed her back, thinking, crazy chick, but I bet she's great in the sack. You promise? Jess bit her lip anxiously, her eyes searching Charlie's face. I promise. Charlie ran his hand up and down Jess's back and brushed her hair out of her face. Just stick with me and you'll be fine. And what if I'm not? What if I'm next? The guy told me to look out for signs. What if I'm seeing signs right now and not realizing that they're signs? Jess shifted restlessly in her seat. Look! There's a hot dog stand. What if I'm about to be killed by a giant hot dog? She bit her nails anxiously. You won't be. Just trust me on that one. I'll look after you. Nothing bad can happen to you while I'm around. Scout's honor. Jess looked sidelong at Charlie. She couldn't help feeling like something terrible was about to happen. But he was so adorable, and she wanted to believe him so badly. But that look in his eyes, it was as though he could read her mind. He looked so sweet and caring, as if he would go to the ends of the world to protect her. Guys? What? Can you throw me a sick bag? Shut up, Jamie. Come on, open, damn you! A low-pitched whir filled the air inside the elevator. Eric stepped back from the door, nearly dancing with impatience. He assumed that he'd killed the doors when he'd ripped out the control panel, but now they seemed to be responding, albeit slowly. Closing his eyes, Eric made a silent oath. He'd pulled some crazy shit in his life, but this was pretty much taking the cookie. If he made it out of here, alive, he vowed to lay off the drinking for at least a month. As the thought crossed his mind, there was a clunk and a hum, and the door open light lit up, flashing a pregnant orange. Eric's eyes flew open and he watched with bated breath, scarcely daring to hope. A thin slit of light appeared in front of him as the door slowly began to open. Yes! Eric moved swiftly towards the light, hope flaring in him like a beacon. But as he did so, the sound of the motors died away and the doors creaked to a halt. Eric groaned. Stepping forwards, he jammed a hand through the tiny gap in the doors and tried to lever them open. But try as he might, he couldn't shift them. The motor had frozen, locking the door firmly into place. He might as well have tried to pull apart solid concrete. Eric thumped the door in frustration and put an eye to the crack, peering feverishly outside. The elevator had stopped between floors, and he could just see the edge of the floor with its green linoleum and dirty metal joints. It was just above chest height. Below it was a complicated tangle of piping and wiring, and below that about a foot of the room underneath was visible. There was nobody there either. Eric yelled, "Help! Help me!" through the door for a minute, but there was no response. He stepped back from the door, thinking rapidly. He had to get that door open, and quickly. The brakes might give away any minute. Eric stretched his arms, cracking his joints, and pushed both hands through the gap. It was now or never. With a Herculean effort, he started levering the doors apart. The door motor whined in protest, pulling against him as he grunted and strained, heaving for all that he was worth. Slowly, inch by precious inch, the doors came open, the motor whining shrilly in protest. When they were about a foot apart, Eric carefully reached behind him with his foot. He snagged his backpack and maneuvered it into the gap at the bottom of the doors, wedging them open. Then he let go of the doors and quickly began climbing out of the elevator, squeezing through the gap like a cat and hauling himself up onto the lip of the third floor. At that moment, the elevator creaked again. Whimpering in panic, Eric kicked his legs out behind him, pulling himself through the gap as fast as he could. He saw in his mind's eye the elevator dropping again, cutting him into two gory halves. Damn, he watched way too many horror films to be pulling this shit. Then he was free. Almost sobbing with relief, Eric flung himself forwards and rolled clear of the elevator.
He laid curled on the floor for a moment, breathing deeply. He'd made it. He was alive. Then his eyes flew open as he remembered his bag. He rolled over and peered down inside the elevator, his whole body vibrating with adrenaline. He could clearly see his bag in the shadows wedged between the doors. Perhaps he could find something to fish it out with? He jumped as the sound of a siren blared through the open window behind him. His eyebrows flew to the top of his head. What were the cops doing here? How had they known? Then rationality descended. Perhaps the cops didn't know about his little drug stash, but they'd probably been called by some kind of automatic elevator alarm thingy. Eric realized that he had to get his backpack and get it back fast. Scrambling to his feet, Eric made a quick decision. He would go to the next floor and try to grab his bag back from there. It would be a heck of a lot easier than trying to get a hold of it from where he was. There was a door at the end of the room. Eric jogged towards it, picking up speed as the siren continued to blare outside. He shouldered his way through it and ran out into the darkened stairwell. It was so dark that he could barely see, but he didn't have time to stop and hunt for a light switch. He began pounding down the stairs 2 at a time. He was vaguely aware that there was something he should be remembering, but his mind was so clouded with panic that he couldn't think straight. His head throbbed as he pounded his way downwards, flying around the corner at breakneck speed. As he did, his foot caught on something stretched across the stairwell. He threw out his arms to try to grab the rail, but it was too late. With the feeling of disbelief, he felt himself start to fall, plunging forwards at full speed down the stairwell. A second later, he plowed into what looked like a wall of yellow police tape, stuck across the top of the stairs, between the floors. The tape pulled away and wrapped itself around him as he continued his fall, hitting the stairs hard and bouncing downwards in a flail of limbs. "What the fuck?" Eric thought hazily. His head cracked against the first step with bone-splitting force, and then he saw nothing but darkness. Dude, are you okay, dude? The security guard groaned as he slowly swam back to consciousness. Some kid was peering down at him, shaking him by the shoulders. "Get off me," he muttered groggily. He tried to get up, but found that he couldn't move. Every cell in his body was throbbing, his whole body as if like it had been squeezed for about a year in a giant vice. He moaned and rolled over, clutching his head. His hand came away red with blood. He stared at it stupidly. "Bleeding?" he said. "Why am I bleeding?" He looked around him, aware that something important was missing. "And where's my hat?" The kid backed off and was replaced by a worried-looking paramedic who loomed above him. "Try to relax, sir. We'll be moving you into the ambulance in a minute, okay? Just relax." "Ambulance?" The guard struggled to keep his eyes open. "Where? What?" "Dude, that was fucking awesome." Now the kid was back, looking down at him and grinning like a goon. "You should have seen yourself. You went flying across the room like Superman. It was so neat. Does your head hurt? 'Cause I think you hit it." "Stand back. Coming through," said the paramedic. He put a collapsible gurney down next to the guard and folded it out. "Places, people." A team of 5 other medics surrounded the guard, rolling up their sleeves and readying equipment. 1, 2, 3, lift! They lifted the groaning security guard up onto the gurney and started to wheel him towards the door. The guard gazed down at his boots from his horizontal position. They were smoking. He was sure that that wasn't entirely normal. Then he heard the door crash open. Footsteps ran into the room and a female voice yelled, "Eric! Eric!" "No, it's Jason, actually. Ugh," said the guard, trying to be helpful. He heard the footsteps move over towards him and tried to sit up, but some invisible guide bashed him on the head with a red-hot poker. He subsided, grimacing. Then a face was peering down at him, some girl in a pink sweater. The guard screwed up his eyes, trying to focus on her. He thought she looked a little familiar. She certainly looked very worried. Could this be his girlfriend? He couldn't remember, but he hoped it was. She was, kinda pretty. "What happened?" the girl asked the paramedic. "Yeah, what happened?" asked Jason. "Electric shock," said the medic. "I'm going to have to ask you to stand back. We need to get this guy to the hospital." He kicked the brakes off the gurney and started wheeling it towards the door.
"How did he get shocked?" asked the girl trotting alongside.
Boy, she was persistent. "Ask this guy. He said he touched something in the wall. We're looking into it." There was a pause. Then a male voice said,
"Holy cow, it's you?" "Yeah, it's me," said the girl, sounding anxious. "Where's Eric?"
"I'm here," said the guard pathetically. "And I told you my name's not Eric, it's Jason."
"Where is it?" asked a voice in his head.
"What if I really am Eric?
Would I remember that?"
He gazed up at the ceiling, a wave of existential confusion washing over him. He turned his head and reached out to the girl.
"Honey, could you find my hat? It's got my name in on it."
There was a snigger from the boy.
"What?" asked the guard as they wheeled him out.
As the paramedics disappeared out the door, Jess turned back to Ben tensely.
"I saw the ambulances parked outside. I knew I'd find you here. I just knew it."
"Did Eric call you?"
"No, that's just it. I need to find him. It's urgent. Where is he?"
"Dunno," Ben shrugged. "He went up in that elevator like 10 minutes ago."
"And he hasn't come down yet?"
"Not that I know of. Hey, don't touch that!"
"Why?"
said Jess, her hand frozen halfway to the elevator call button. "I think that's what that guy touched that gave him a shock."
"Fine, I'll take the stairs, and you should tell that guy,"
said Jess, pointing over her shoulder as she headed towards the fire escape.
"I will,"
said Ben, gazing at the stern-looking officer who was kneeling by the wall. The man was examining it carefully, looking at it like it might bite him. "Eventually?" Ben giggled to himself and settled down to watch. Today was proving to be hugely entertaining. He hoped that Eric would be back soon. He had so much to tell him. Is Eric okay? Will Charlie and Jamie become BFFs in the car waiting on Jess? Will the 80s slasher librarian figure out the difference between an Irish accent and a Scottish one? Find out next time. Same slasher time, same slasher channel. Alright guys, this has been Chapter 9 of Final Destination Dead Reckoning. I gotta say, for a pretty lengthy chapter, not a whole lot of stuff happened. I mean, we got a little bit of character development with Jess and Jamie and Charlie. But at this point of the book, character development should be over with. I gotta admit, compared to the other books we've done, this one is a little underwhelming. And it's definitely not my favorite. A lot of people told me that I would dig this one more than Dead Man's Hand. But at this point, honestly, the writing is just throwing me off. I can't decide what the author's going with here with the characters. Eric did a complete 360 at the beginning of the book, and then that night he spent with Jess, and then he just went right back to the way he was. We got Charlie, 1 second he's like this asshole sociopath, and the next he might actually care a little bit, and then we find out he's just an arrogant sociopath again. Jamie's all over the place, the way he was acting in the beginning of the book, helping her escape from the police, and now he's all serious and barely talking, and then he's, I don't know, then Jess talking about a giant hot dog killing her. I don't know, guys. Am I wrong here? Am I off base? Or is anybody else thinking and feeling these things too? The inconsistencies with the characters. And, we've only got like 120 pages left in the book. And I feel like 100 pages ago, we should have already been hitting all the hardcore death scenes and stuff for a Final Destination book. Dead Man's Hand took a long time to get to that. But once it got there, it just kicked into high gear and stayed there. This book started off in high gear, went to low gear, and every now and then it like shifts up to second or third, but then goes right back down to first gear again. So I'm not going to give a full judgment on the entire book till I've finished it, but so far I'm a little bit underwhelmed. That being said, I am still enjoying the book as a Final Destination story. I'm just ranking it with the other ones that I've narrated so far. But I want to hear from you guys what you thought of tonight's chapter, what you think of the book so far. Please drop me a comment below, And please, guys, please take the time to click that thumbs up, that like button there on YouTube. That really does help out the channel. Lets people know that there's some great content here. And I'll be back very soon with more of this book. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and
I'll see you soon.